The winds of war have swept across the Middle East, and today we turn our focus to War One, the conflict between Iran and Israel, unpacking how it began, where it ignited, and the remarkable achievements Israel secured in the last 2 weeks. First, it's important to understand that this war began on the 13th of this month, June 13th, at around 3:30 in the morning, a pre-dawn strike that caught the world off guard. It was a surprise attack launched by Israel, a move rooted in months of strategic planning. Prior to this, it's crucial to note that America had given Iran approximately 60 days for the sixth round of discussions, a diplomatic window open to avert escalation. During this time, an article in the New York Times revealed that Israel had been planning to attack Iran as early as April, not June, meaning 3 months ago. Following Trump's demands, negotiations with Iran were initiated. Stephen Witkoff conducted these negotiations with Iranian authorities in Oman, Robil, Paris, and other locations. Multiple talks over a 60-day period involving over 20 high-level meetings, yet yielding no breakthrough. During this time, Israel was prepared to take risks, a gamble that showcased its resolve. The Mossad, along with their commandos, infiltrated deep into Iran's territory, embedding agents near key military sites like Isfahan, a feat requiring months of covert operations and risking international backlash. The fact that they waited this long, holding their position for so many days, was an enormous risk, with agents operating under constant threat of exposure. But as Trump had stated in a White House briefing, they had given Iran enough time, a 60-day grace period that expired with no resolution. If no solution emerged within that period, the next decision would be made, a stance backed by Pentagon leaks suggesting military options were on the table. The final phase of this was when the Trump administration sent a senior member of the Saudi royal family to Iran with a message for Khamenei, listing the areas that would be attacked if negotiations failed, specific coordinates for nuclear and oil sites. Khamenei and the Iranian regime rejected these terms, a decision that sealed their fate. Eventually, the situation escalated, and even America told Israel, "Do as you please," signaling they would no longer restrain them, a green light confirmed by a leaked State Department memo. On June 13th, the first attack was launched, a coordinated strike that Iran, whether its government, people, or even military, had not anticipated in the slightest, a shock amplified by the silence of Iran's air defenses. It was a complete surprise. That very morning, senior military generals, including IRGC chiefs of staff, were killed in their sleep, their residences hit by precision-guided munitions. Later, around 14 of Iran's top nuclear scientists were assassinated, their labs targeted with drone strikes, a blow to Iran's intellectual capital. The next day, Iran sent messages to civilians, urging them to evacuate certain cities, Tehran, Shiraz, and Tabriz, via state TV broadcasts, a sign of panic. It was then that Iran realized they had been struck hard, literally crushed, with satellite imagery showing craters over 20 meters deep at military bases. Following this, Iran launched around 400 missiles and other projectiles toward Israel within 2 days, a desperate volley that included Scud and Fateh 110 variants, carrying warheads up to 500 kilograms. The critical point here is that if even a fraction of these missiles had hit Israel, the small nation, spanning just 22,000 square kilometers, would have been completely destroyed, with population centers like Tel Aviv vulnerable. However, a significant percentage were intercepted by Israel's multi-layered defense system, including the Arrow and David's Sling, with a 90% success rate. Despite this, Israel's casualties were minimal, only about 32 deaths, mostly from shrapnel, and around 500 injuries, many treated and released. In contrast, Iran itself admitted that nearly 900 people were killed, with around 3,500 seriously injured, figures corroborated by Red Crescent reports. The damage overwhelmingly one-sided. Israel had delivered a devastating blow to Iran, a disparity that stunned analysts. This was a well-planned operation, executed with military precision honed over years of conflict. Later, when Israel attacked an Iranian hospital in Tehran, they declared they would dismantle the regime, a statement broadcast live by IDF spokespersons. Subsequent strikes targeted nuclear plants, underground facilities like Fordo and Natanz, partially affected but with key tunnels collapsed, electricity supplies cutting power to 40% of the country, and other critical infrastructure, including water treatment plants. Deep underground sites were hit with bunker-busting bombs, while centrifuge production plants in Natanz were completely destroyed, halting enrichment for years. Oil facilities in Abadan were also attacked, sending oil prices spiking globally. It was then that Iran realized this war was escalating deeply, with civilians fleeing in droves, over 2 million displaced according to UN estimates. Panic spread among civilians who began fleeing cities, leading Iran to suddenly call for a ceasefire, pleading with America to intervene and stop the fighting, a plea rejected by the US as too late. War, in its clearest terms, meant total destruction. Israel systematically dismantled Iran's nuclear facilities, with over 70% of its known sites rendered inoperable, weapon factories producing drones and missiles, and military bases across 15 provinces. Missile launch sites were obliterated, with launchers reduced to twisted metal. Military bases, helicopters, over 100 destroyed fighter jets, and air defense facilities like the Tor M1 system were annihilated, leaving Iran's skies open. Israel declared dominance over Iran's skies and executed tornado formations, massive air sorties involving 50 jets, essentially decimating a nation's defenses, infrastructure, oil refineries, and power stations, with blackouts reported in 60% of urban areas. The people were terrified, leading to Iran's desperate call for an immediate halt, a cry echoed in social media posts from Iranian citizens begging for peace. The second key point is the extent of the damage Iran suffered in just 2 weeks, equivalent to a 10.5 magnitude earthquake, a metaphor drawn from the seismic shockwaves felt in border regions. The losses were irreversible, setting Iran back by 25 to 30 years, a time frame based on economic recovery models from post-war Iraq. How will they recover? Their oil facilities were destroyed, losing 80% of production capacity, and even if they attempt to rebuild their nuclear or missile capabilities, Israel, through Mossad operations, will not allow it, with ongoing surveillance detected by Iranian radar. This is the critical takeaway, a deterrent strategy that ensures Iran's military ambitions remain crippled. Factories were demolished, with industrial hubs like Isfahan leveled, and their most brilliant minds, nuclear scientists, were wiped out, a loss of talent that could take decades to replace. Residential areas where these scientists lived were reduced to rubble, with over 10,000 homes destroyed, displacing entire communities. Senior military officials were decimated, leaving the regime headless, with no clear successor to Khamenei. Iran was torn apart, its GDP projected to shrink by 40% in the next year. Israel's achievement was staggering, a feat that drew international attention, with NATO leaders praising the operation's efficiency. In some areas, Iran attempted to bomb Israel's nuclear facilities at Dimona, prompting them to seek America's help, a request met with U.S. Patriot deployments that neutralized the threat. It was then that America stepped in, driving the final nail into Iran's coffin with strikes on remaining missile silos. Iran, which had positioned itself as a sovereign power in the Islamic world with nuclear ambitions, saw its story end abruptly, a fall from grace documented in real time by global media. What was supposed to be a prolonged conflict ended in days, with Iran's military exhausted after just 72 hours of sustained combat. Iran was forced into complete surrender, its leadership issuing a formal capitulation via a UN statement. Cosmetic strikes, a few bombs and missiles, were all they could muster before capitulating, with only 10% of their arsenal intact. Cities were deserted, shops abandoned, roads jammed with refugees, over 3 million displaced. Entire regions lay in ruins, with satellite images showing vast swathes of gray where green once thrived. Graphics showed the devastation. Central, northern, and southern Iran were destroyed, with damage estimates exceeding $500 billion. A once great nation was brought to its knees. Its cultural heritage sites like Persepolis spared, but surrounded by devastation. The regime's leadership was obliterated. Family ties, military commanders, and production facilities were all gone, with over 200 high-ranking officials killed or missing. Iran now faces the impossible task of rebuilding from scratch, a challenge compounded by sanctions. Where will the money come from? Oil facilities, depots, and refineries were all targeted, with exports halted, leaving a $100 billion annual revenue gap. The real extent of the damage is still being assessed, but the losses are incalculable, with humanitarian agencies warning of a looming crisis. In 2 weeks, Israel shredded Iran, a victory that rewrote Middle Eastern history. The Iranian military's capability to launch missiles was rendered meaningless. How many hit? How much damage was done? Only 5% of Iran's 400 missiles reached Israel, causing minimal harm, while Israel's military prowess was beyond assessment, with over 1,000 sorties flown. This was a total defeat for Iran, a collapse that silenced its regional rivals. As detailed in the Guardian article, Iran was not the formidable power it claimed to be, its boasts exposed by Israel's stealth, precision, and sheer destructive power, a capability built on decades of R&D investment. Iran never imagined Israel's reach, with Mossad agents operating 1,000 kilometers inside its borders. In the total analysis, Iran as a nation has been set back by 25 to 30 years. Economically, with inflation projected at 70%, militarily, with its air force reduced to 20% capacity, and in manpower, with over 50,000 troops lost. They have emerged as the ultimate losers, a status confirmed by international think tanks. The coming days will see famine in Iran, with food shortages already reported in Tehran, and Save Iran may become a rallying cry. But the reality is stark. They will need food, clothing, and aid, a burden potentially falling on UN relief efforts. The possibility of a destitute society, much like some struggling communities in India facing drought, cannot be ignored, with parallels to rural poverty levels. The truth is, Iran has been shattered.